The Iowa Department of Revenue, welcome to our webinar today on valuations and notices. We've got 83 people on so far and more are joining us. So we're thrilled that you've taken a little time out of your busy day to attend our first webinar of 2017. Now, before we go any further, we want to say thank you so much to ISAC for giving us this opportunity to share information and to be together on this webinar. It's a tremendous resource and it's a greatly appreciated opportunity for us to have a chance to talk about things that happen every once in a while, like today, something that happens every couple of years. So thank you, ISAC. We greatly appreciate your time. And I also wanted to mention to you that we've muted the phones because there are so many people on the call today. We wanted to make sure that you could hear. Now, this is our agenda. We're going to step through this. It will take us at most a half an hour. But we also wanted to mention that we know you're going to have questions and we want very much to address your questions. So please jot down this email address, propertytax@iowa.gov. Out of respect to your time and all the things you have to do today and every day, we're going to ask you to send your questions into this email box so that we can address them all and we can address them with you individually and make that the most expeditious use of your time. So if you would please jot down this email address, and we'll have it for you again in a moment. Later in the presentation. And please send in your questions. We look forward to it. I monitor this email box, so I will be watching for your questions, and I will get back to you today. Now, let's talk just a little bit about the Iowa Code. We mention it quite a bit in our webinars, and everything we're talking about today is in Iowa Code Chapter 441 and in Administrative Code Section 701.71. Now, I wanted to take just a second and show you how to find this information if you ever need to look up anything in the Iowa Code or the administrative rules. This is the website for the Iowa Legislature, and under the quick search, you enter the information for the chapter, which in this case would be 441. And that's where you would find the information that we reference when we talk about Iowa Code. I reference this constantly, especially when we're looking at questions that you send to us or if we're having contacts from taxpayers. I've even printed out Chapter 441 and I have it at my desk so I can reference it from time to time as I need it. So here's how you can search that on the legislative website, and if you need to look at the administrative rules or the Iowa Administrative Code, as it is now called, you just click on that link that says Iowa Law and Rules on the upper right-hand corner, and you will see a similar section where you can do a quick search of the rules and find the details that you are looking for. So as I have often said, that my mentor once told me to always put a volunteer in between you and trouble, and I have found when working with taxpayers that the Iowa Code is a fabulous volunteer to represent why we do what we do and how we do what we do by following the law. Now let's talk about today's subject, which is valuations and notices. So as you well know, you have been working on this for quite some time. January 1st of every odd year is when valuations are determined and when the notices are provided to taxpayers who have received an increase in the valuation of their properties. So by law, the market value represents the valuation for residential, multi-residential, commercial, industrial, unless it's subject to special valuation like Section 42 and wind farms. And also by law, there is the productivity value for ag property. So we know, and you know very well, that those notices for increases are required by Iowa Code to be postmarked by the 1st of April. And there's another section of the code that talks about the contents. And I've had a lot of questions that have come in this week about the contents on those notices. So I did pull a section of the Iowa Code up out of that search I showed you earlier so we could take a look at it and see a little bit about what this says. Now, it says that the notices are to have this indented paragraph, something, not exactly these words, but something that represents this substantially. It says that the notice shall contain substantially the following information. And that is that it talks about the fact that there can be an informal review. We're going to talk more about that in just a moment. It talks about how you can make a formal protest to the Board of Review and the dates that are there. And there's also a section in the code that talks about telling people this is an equalization year, and there may be an equalization notice, and if there's an increase in your property because of that notice, there will be a letter that comes to you from the auditor that tells you about this, and you have the ability to discuss that with the Board of Review and file a protest later this year. So this is the information that the Iowa Code has identified to include on your valuation notices. And this includes the dates for the session, the special equalization session that would be held by the Board of Review October 10 to November 15. Now we're going to go over that calendar again, we're going to go over these protests again, and we're going to go through all of this in more detail today. Now, on the subject of protests, let's begin that conversation. According to the Iowa Code, there are 6 grounds that someone can appeal the valuation that they received from you, postmarked by the 1st of April. So the first one, and you, I'm sure, are far more familiar with these than I am. You live this world every day. The assessment is not equitable compared to other properties in the taxing district. People need to provide comparables on their petition to demonstrate that this is the cause. Number 2 is that the assessed value is more than the value authorized by law, which is market value. So number 3 is that it's not accessible. It should be exempt under Iowa Chapter 427 for the reasons that are defined in the Iowa Code. Now we've got 6 reasons, or grounds as they're called, for the protest. Number 4 is that there's an error, which could mean that the property was misclassified, or it could mean that there was some sort of a math error, and that only will apply if the taxes have not yet been paid or legally discharged on a property. So there are certain limitations if someone wants to provide a protest based on that ground. Number 5, there was fraud in the assessment, and number 6 is there was a decrease in value from the previous assessment year. And in even years, the only ground that can be reviewed with the Board of Review is if someone says there's been a decrease in value from previous assessment years. I had someone call me recently to talk about the fact that there had been a fire in their property, and we talked about this as one of the grounds for that discussion. So those are the grounds for protests. Now let's take a look at the review process. We have, when that valuation notice is received, the taxpayer can request an informal review with the assessor. And those reviews are from the 2nd to the 25th of April. Now these are some new dates that are coming into play this year from some legislation that was passed in 2015. So we've got the review dates for the informal review from the 2nd to the 25th of April. In the informal review, the assessor and the taxpayer agree to the valuation in writing. Both parties must sign the agreement, and it must be based on one of the 6 grounds that we just reviewed in the Iowa Code. And I believe that ISAA has had a program on the subject of the informal reviews recently, and that there have been some ideas circulated with your association on ways you could put that information in writing, which is all very good and valuable for you. So that's our informal review between the 2nd and the 25th of April. Now, if someone is interested in filing a formal review, the dates for that are the 2nd to the 30th of April. So there's a small window between the 25th and 30th that if someone were to meet with you and still think they needed to talk to the Board of Review, there's the opportunity for that to occur. So April is when the protest is filed. It must be in writing. It must be signed. It must be filed timely. It must be based on one of the 6 grounds we talked about in just a few minutes ago. Your Board of Review will meet between the 1st and the 31st of May, and if more time is needed, the Board can request an extension from the Director of the Department of Revenue up to July 15th to complete its work. Now, whatever decision is made by the Board of Review, it is provided to the taxpayer in writing, and we've got a snippet here from one of the forms that's available on our website for that purpose. And of course, if the taxpayer is not pleased with the results from the Board of Review decision, the taxpayer can appeal to the Property Assessment Appeal Board, or PAB, and or district court. So the taxpayer could bypass PAB and go directly to district court, but they would have to make that filing within 20 days of the conclusion of the Board of Review session. There is no stipulation of when the appeal can be made to PAB, but if the taxpayer wants to make an appeal to PAB, then they can proceed with that, and if they're not pleased with the order from PAB, then they could also go then to district court. So the taxpayer has a number of options after they leave your realm, which includes the information that is shared and the protest that is filed with the Board of Review. Now let's talk about another thing that happens, and that is if there is a disaster county. This, if there's been a federally declared disaster area, there's a new window of time to file a protest for review by the Board of Review. That begins after the 1st of March and it concludes before the 20th of May, so that window is more time than the protests that can be filed after receiving the valuation notice. The filing period for the petition is extended up to June 5th. So the window of time that a disaster area is declared is between the 1st of March and the 20th of May. The window of time for filing a petition is extended until the 5th of June. And the Board of Review can request that extension so they have time to review these protests up to the 15th of July. Now, again, in the event of a disaster county, a federally declared disaster area, the appeal must be based on one or more of the grounds defined in the Iowa Code. Now we're going to talk next about the equalization timeline. I'm going to take a drink of water real quick here. Okay. Now, we know that this is an odd year and this is an equalization year. So this is going to happen August, September, October, November. In August, a tentative order will come from the Department of Revenue to advise if there is or is not the possibility of an equalization order on classes of property within your jurisdiction. There's an opportunity to discuss that with the Department of Revenue, and final orders are issued by the 1st of October. Then this is the notification to the taxpayer which comes into play this year, and that is notification from the auditor by the 8th of October by mail for valuation increases. Now previously and still there is a need to publish the valuation increases and information from equalization orders, usually in the newspaper, and that remains, but what's new this year is that if there's been an increase, by the 8th of October, the taxpayer is to be notified by mail. So then the period for filing a protest follows between the 9th of October and the end of the month, and a special session for equalization by the Board of Review occurs beginning on the 10th of October and going to the 15th of November. So this is the timeline for notices and protests that occur related to equalization. And again, the notice that you're working on right now, the valuation notice, that's April 1st, that comes from the assessor. The equalization notice, that comes from the auditor, and that comes in October. Now, let's take a look at the Iowa Code related to this just for clarification. And it specifies that that notice comes from the auditor. It specifies that it must be postmarked by October 8th. And this says that on that notice, approximately this statement should be included that talks about the ability to file a protest between the 9th of October and the 31st of October. So there's information about when that protest can be filed. So these are the things that the taxpayer will see on the notice from the auditor. So I mention this because we all know that sometimes people reach us whether they know they're supposed to be talking to us or not about a question. And this way you're familiar with this notice that will be coming from the auditor, what it says, and what needs to happen next for taxpayers who want to file that protest. So let's take a look at what we've been talking about today, and let's review this again. We've talked about how written agreement needs to follow the informal review with the assessor, and the window of time is April 2nd to the 25th for that. We've talked about the Board of Review, the regular session that happens in the month of May, the disaster county session, which can extend beyond May into June and as late as the middle of July if needed to address those concerns, and the equalization session, which occurs between the middle of October and the middle of November, the 10th of October to the 15th of November. So we've talked about those Board of Review sessions for people to protest their valuations, that they all must be based on one of the 6 grounds defined by law in the Iowa Code, and that there are provisions in the code to appeal to PAB or to the district court if a taxpayer is not happy with the decision they receive if they appeal their valuation to the Board of Review. So we have these options in place, and this is the year that this happens as part of our every other year valuation process according to the Iowa Code, and the exchange that can happen between the assessor and the Board of Review and the taxpayer related to those valuations. Now, we wanted to have a chance to show you where to find the forms that are on our website that are related to this process. Here is the website for the Iowa Department of Revenue, and up at the top on the blue bar there's a link that says Local Government. If you click on that link, you're going to see a web page of information for taxpayers, for assessors, for businesses, and for other local government offices. Now, if you need to direct someone to a form so that they can file a protest with the Board of Review, there's a link called Local Boards of Review under Taxpayer Information, and that's where you will find links to the forms. Now, for you and for your Boards of Review, we have a link under the For Assessors area of the website, and that has the document, it has the booklet we've put together on duties and responsibilities of the local Board of Review that you can share with your Board of Review members. It has links to the notices if you need them to go out to taxpayers based on the decisions of the Board of Review in the different, the regular session and equalization session. And there's also a notice here in the event that there is an omitted property that needs to be assessed. There's another notice here. So the assessor's information is just for you. The taxpayer information are links to the people that you work with if they need petitions to file for the Board of Review. Also, I wanted to mention that here under Self-Help and Training, we have what's called the Property Tax Video Center. This is where you can find a recording of today's webinar. Also, the other webinars that we have had the opportunity to provide with our partnership with ISAC. So that's a location for you if you want to review this information in the future or share it with other people on your staff or just refresh yourself when it's time to address some of these issues as they come to you. So that is there. We will post it a little later this week. Now we've got another webinar coming up, and that will be in May 24th. We're going to talk about abstracts one and done, how we can take this process and make it easier and more efficient for everyone, because we know you have so much to do that if there are ways we can talk through some of these things and make your job easier and more efficient, we're so happy to do so. So that's going to be our subject on May 24th, Abstracts 1 and Done. And I wanted to make sure you had the email address to send in your questions. I'm going to leave this on the screen for just a second while I look through my notes and see if there was something else that I wanted to share that I forgot to say, because I'm at that point in time in my life when I can forget to say things that I meant to say. So I'm going to quickly take a look at my notes, and if you would jot down this email address so that you can send your questions into me. I'll be back in the office in about a half an hour, and I will be delighted to respond to your emails and address your questions on a one-on-one basis. And of course, we also want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your time today. Thank you for hosting this ISAC. We so appreciate our partnership to help bring this information to assessors and to assessor staff. I'm taking a look at my notes. I think we covered all the things that I had down to cover with you. So I look forward to your emails so we can talk more about this subject and answer your specific questions. And Tammy is also going to send you out an evaluation so that we can get your feedback on whether or not this was valuable, what other things we could be including here that would be helpful for you, and other things that we can talk about in this kind of forum that will help make your jobs go smoother, go better, and help you get through all the things that we know you have on your plate. This is such a busy time for everyone. We so appreciate you taking a half an hour of your day this morning to share this information with you and to gather your feedback. So thank you so very much. We'll leave this up for a few moments, and this concludes our webinar for this morning. Thank you again for your time.